BOOKFEST Digital, der Special Edition im Rahmen der diesjährigen Frankfurter Buchmesse. Ich freue mich, Sie durch die nächsten 4 Stunden begleiten zu dürfen. Die erste Stunde, die steht ganz im Zeichen der Gastländer der Frankfurter Buchmesse. 2019 präsentierte sich Norwegen. Dort entsteht derzeit eine Bibliothek der Zukunft, die ein Gesamtkunstwerk ist und erst 2114 das Licht der Welt erblickt. Wir blicken auch noch einmal nach Georgien. 2018 war es zu Gast mit seiner so ehrwürdigen wie eigenwilligen Literaturlandschaft. Und 2023 erwarten wir Slowenien, ein junges kosmopolitisches Land, auch literarisch. Die Starköchin Anna Rosch etwa hat ein Kochbuch veröffentlicht, Sun and Rain. Es ist eine Hommage an die Geschichte der Landschaft, an die Geschichte der Familie, an die Geschichte Sloweniens. Und wir schauen noch einmal, was die Künstler in Slowenien in Zeiten der Corona-Krise alles so machen. Viel Spaß!
When you write a novel, you have to have faith that this story is going to take you somewhere beautiful. When you write a book, you have the faith that it will reach out to someone else, to someone who's different from you, and it will connect us.
Future Library is an artwork that's going to unfold over 100 years. Today we're in the forest because we're cutting down the trees to clear a space to grow Future Library. In a month or so we'll be planting right here in the forest about 1,000 trees, and when the trees are fully grown we're going to cut them down and print a book which is written now but never read until 100 years. We're inviting one writer a year over the 100 years to write a piece which could be anything, fiction, non-fiction, poetry, from one word to any length of words. And that will be held in a special place inside the new library in Oslo, and then in 100 years' time it will be made public and printed. So nobody will read any of these texts until far in the future. Not the next generation, maybe the next generation after that. This project has been so much about ideas and about the imagination, and it's really nice to be physically working with these roots in the plants and putting them in the ground and knowing that their growth is going to contain, effectively all the ideas of the writers growing through the roots over the years.
So proud. That's what forestry is about. And that's what city planning is about. We are making decisions today that are extremely important for 2 generations to come. Can you imagine if somebody came to you tomorrow and telling you, I have this beautiful gift, a book, because your great-grandmother bought a certificate without knowing, and now it's published and it's for you. What a gift.
The process of writing, when somebody's going to read it but you don't know them and you don't experience it now, might be quite a strange experience for the writers. Hopefully their ideas are going to kind of grow through the trees and the tree rings become a little bit like chapters in a book. I'm going to be building and designing a small room inside the Oslo New Library where the manuscripts will be held over the 100 years. And we're going to build the room using the trees that we've cut down in the forest. So we've been storing these trees since the forest was planted, and now they've transformed and become this room. It contains the smell of the forest, it contains the atmosphere of the forest, the softness and the warmth of the wood. And it's almost like being inside a tree. It's like tree rings gather around us inside the room. All around us are these apertures of light, and these are small drawers that are going to hold the manuscripts that the authors have written and contributed to the project. Every single drawer is going to hold almost a treasure for the future, for future generations. Each author's name is going to be inscribed on the glass and the year, and there's a light from behind that will allow us to have a glimpse of their manuscript through each drawer. Throughout the design process, we were looking to create an intimate space that brings people into a kind of mysterious, imaginative, calm, contemplative state of mind where they can read the author's names, they can imagine what's inside the manuscripts. The room is designed in 100 layers. Each layer has one drawer inside for each author, and the authors can choose their drawers, and the drawers come out, the manuscripts go inside, and then they're locked away for a whole century, and nobody will read anything that's inside them until then.
First I thought, that's just mad. What do you mean? I write something and no one gets to read it. So actually I first thought, I'm going to sort of not answer this and maybe it'll go away. Then some weeks went by and I started to think about it more and in a slow kind of way, slow art. I thought, yes, it is kind of mad, but there's good mad and bad mad, and I think this is good mad. I liked the me that believed in it more than I liked the me that didn't believe in it. It's trees, it's books, it's a circle, it's pulp, it's organic matter turning into this stuff, turning into that, and then the words get printed on them. I love that.
We use games to bring the best out in the collective creative mind. The Future Library is really a hard game to play for an author, but joyful as well. One of the things that really proved to me that I'm taking part in a game is that it really challenges all the aspects of writing, all the aspects of being an author. And one of the first things you think about is the fact that you're writing a work that will lay dormant for 100 years almost, for those of us who take part in the beginning. But that, of course, it also reminds you that you are a writer who hopes to survive time, you know. Of course, I hope people will be reading some of my stories or poems, you know, in 100 years anyway. But of course, at the moment, because now I have finished the text, I will enter the second phase of my involvement in the game, and that is to keep a secret. And as we know from childhood, keeping a secret is a game. And that is going to be the hardest part.
I was daydreaming. I was drawing tree rings on a napkin or on a notebook on a train. I imagined these tree rings as chapters in a book. So I saw this very, very clearly, but simply through this representation of tree rings and chapters and books and time. this isn't going to happen. This is one of these ideas that is definitely going to have to go away to the side. And so it did. So that was years and years before. And then I got invited by a remarkable woman, Anna Beata Hovind, to come to Oslo for Slow Days, a conference that was looking at artworks that worked in slow time, slow space, that engaged people on a different level of time. I thought to myself, hang on a minute, that idea that so long ago seemed kind of crazy, but that it always, had been stuck in my mind for so long, I'm going to try it here, because maybe here is actually the place, because Norway is such a forward-thinking country. It has such relationships to the environment and longevity and taking care of nature and thinking in long time spans. So we were in the forest together, and that's when I thought, oh, this could be the place. So I had to say, I'm so sorry, but I've got this crazy idea for you.
She said, I have the most brilliant idea and perfect idea for this space. And I was so eager to hear. But then she said, it's going to last for 100 years. And I totally panicked, because I couldn't imagine how I was going to cope with that. Because, she has the idea, but my problem is that I have to make it happen. But then after working on it, building brick on brick literally, and meeting the former director of the library, it was a perfect match of her ideas. Actually got a room in the new public library, and then everything was in the place except the author. And then we decided to try to ask Margaret Atwood.
I am absolutely overjoyed that Margaret Atwood is going to be the first writer for Future Library. She is completely visionary, and she's one of the greatest living authors today.
Well, I thought it was a wonderful idea, and it appealed to me immediately, so I instantly said yes. It does appeal to that side of us who, as children, buried things here and there, little trinkets, little boxes, hoping that somebody would dig them up later.
We are now going to announce the title. It's the only part that you will know for 100 years. But I'm sure some of you will stick around until then, so you can read the rest of it. The title is Scribbler Moon. That gives you a lot of room for speculation. You see, you wanted the idea of writing and the idea of time, and they're both in the title.
Great.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay, so Katie, a few words.
Yeah. Okay. Here we all are. We're standing in a forest. It's just an ordinary forest, but it's also a forest full of promise. Imagine, Margaret Atwood's words have just resonated through these trees. The first voice of another 99 to come. It's not often as an artist, I think, that a real dream comes true. And here we are. It's happening. I'm about to hold a manuscript by Margaret Atwood, and it's going to be printed on these tiny trees, and nobody's going to read it for another 99 years. What a gift. What an honour. I'm about to pass a manuscript over to the Vice Mayor into his safer hands than mine, and I just want to say how deeply, deeply grateful I am to you for being so active in this project. And these words, they've brought the project to life. They've really brought it alive. And thank you so much. Very early on in the project, we realised we needed to form a group of people who will take care of the artwork for the years to come, because I'll be gone, we'll all be gone. So we formed the Future Library Trust. Its mandate is to compassionately sustain the artwork for its 100-year duration. So the Trust are a huge part of this artwork. They take care of the artwork, but they also select the authors. We come with a sense of looking for authors who work with time, existence, being, nature, space, things that connect to the project itself.
이 프로젝트에서 가장 아름다운 부분일 수도 있다고 생각해요. 누군가가 그러니까 이 상을 주최하는 사람들이 모두 다 세상을 떠난 다음에도 그것을 넘겨받아서 그것을 계속하는 사람들이 있을 거 아니에요. 그리고 설령 뭐 아주 비관적으로 생각해서 그때까지 뭐 인류가 살아남지 못한다 해도 그런 노력은 계속될 것이고 누군가가 그것을 열심히 할 것이라는 어떤 신뢰가 있는 거고 저도 그 신뢰를 신뢰합니다. 그래서
I feel like now I belong to a circle, a family of very special souls, beautiful souls, who come from all walks of life. And what unites us is our faith, is our hope about the future, but also our commitment to books, to culture, to literature, to the art of storytelling.
The Future Library is an inspiring project, and it gives us great pride and joy that it takes place just here in the city of Oslo. By building the Future Library, we engage in a dialogue with the coming generations. We are constructing a bridge between today and tomorrow.
This artwork's kind of come from this extremely simple idea, and it's grown and grown and grown, and we could never have predicted the response from people, and it continues to touch me, it continues to just move me, that it affects people. And it's, I think, one of the reasons for that is that we're living in this really frightening moment. People are scared. We're in climate crisis, climate catastrophe. Things move so fast, technology so fast. Time is running, it feels like time is running away with us all the time. And this project addresses some basic human needs and desires. That's to connect with nature and to connect with time, to connect with time past and to connect with time future, and to believe in that future, because it's a future that right now feels quite hazardous.
It's very optimistic to believe, to do a project that believes that there will be people in 100 years, that those people will still be reading, that they will be interested in opening all of these boxes and seeing what's inside them, and that we will be able to communicate across time, which is what any book is in any case. It's always a communication across space and time. This one is just a little bit longer.
As the project unfolds, I'm starting to realise that it is a story in itself. It builds stories, the authors contribute their stories, but it is a little bit like a fairy tale. I think Future Library really appeals to children, and I think in this case, I've made the artwork for these children in a way, and the children of these children. They are the people that are going to see this project through, and they're the people that in generations from now are inheriting what we leave behind. This year I had my own son in the forest, and I have great hope that they'll be the ones that take it on in the future and that transform our world more generally, these children.
Every year, for the next 95 years, we will gather here. We will meet here in the forest. We will do a walk, have our coffee, sit down on the ground in this clearing and listen to the author's reading. A simple, grounded ritual at the heart of the Future Library artwork by the artist Katie Patterson.
In geological terms, Tbilisi and the environs are the seabed, which was formed in the tertiary period of the Cainozoic era. There are layers of the Cretaceous period underneath. Fishes and mollusks used to live here, while billions of biochemical processes churned, exactly the same ones that penetrate the living cells of the urban dwellers of today. Maybe because of this biodiversity, Tbilisi throughout its history has been a very diverse city. Like various sea creatures, species of sea creatures, various ethnic, religious, cultural, linguistic groups coexisted here, mingling but also keeping their identity. This diversity was tolerated by the city. Moreover, the city encouraged this diversity. Georgians, Armenians, Azerbaijanis, Russians, Jewish, Yazidis, Germans, Poles, Arabs, for some 4 centuries, used to coexist here without any problem or conflict. There was a saying, popular saying in the city, you should be a good man, a decent, manly man, and no matter where you utter your prayers. Yes, Tbilisi was the sea, but it was a wine-dark sea, because wine has been and it still is a ubiquitous substance in this city, a juice of very special kind, like the blood that flows in the veins of the dwellers of the city today. And if you ask me, the wine talk emerged as one of the literary genres of this city, because where there is wine talk. Passionate, emotional, humorous, self-ironic. It would take poetic forms sometimes, and sometimes serious poets would also write this kind of texts. Let me suggest one tiny example. A short one, almost like Japanese haiku, written by brilliant Georgian romanticist poet Nicholas Baratashvili in the early 19th century. Excuse my bad translation, but I'll suggest it still. The original goes as follows. Amavse brinit, agavse lachinit, shesvi gams. So in English it is like this, if you fill me up with wine, I will fill you up with joy, so let us drink and enjoy. Well, Tbilisi loved poetry, Tbilisi recited poetry, Tbilisi read poetry. Some of this poetry was written by Georgian kings, late medieval Georgian kings, who were not bad poets, by the way. At least they were better poets than they were politicians. What comprised the average Tbilisi library that period? It was small, of course. It was The Night in the Panther Skin by Shota Rustaveli, of course, Georgian national epic. But it was also Georgian translations and adaptations of Mid-Eastern romances, tales, love poems, Big literature comes to this city in early 20th century, when the modernism came to Tbilisi. That's late 1910s, early 1920s. Tbilisi becomes a very vibrant modernist city, an international modernist city, because many modernist artists and authors would come to Tbilisi, would migrate from collapsing Russian Empire and be based here. And the city's cafes and restaurants were full of symbolists and Cubo-futurists clashing, announcing their manifestos. There were discussions, there were performances, very vibrant modernist life. However, if you ask me, the best texts and novels written about this city emerged when postmodernism comes to Tbilisi. The generation of post-Soviet period of 1990s and 2000s. They try to deconstruct, they try to reread the spirit of this city. They try to rejuvenate it. They try to break some cliches about this city and of course urbanize Georgian literary language, the language of Georgian novel of that time. Now we are in the very heart of the city. That's the bath area, the famous bath area with naturally hot subterranean sulfur water, the place where the city was born, as the legend tells. When the king was hunting and when he discovered these hot waters, hot springs, he decreed the city here. And today this city still inspires many authors and many artists. It still remains a big source of inspiration. It still is a sea in these terms, a wine-dark sea.
We are in Gori now. This is a small town in East Georgia, quite close to Tbilisi. A few years ago it was very hard for me to imagine that I would feel so connected to this town one day because of the events which took place here a few years ago.
And right now we are standing in front of the house which was bombed by Russians exactly 12 years ago, like this one.
And I guess the whole world saw the videos and photos from this place and exactly of these buildings which are behind us right now. When I look back and start thinking about the Russia-Georgia War of 2008, I realized that this became the war of our generation because this is the war where our friends, our classmates were taken. And of course I'm not surprised that these events had a huge influence on Georgian literature as well, in particular on the texts of young Georgian authors. And very important that so many really interesting texts were created based on these real events. This includes prose, poetry, also documentary prose. And I think that both of us are among the people who were influenced by the War of 2008.
And I think it's very important because all these books, it's like part of the history. It's like something what next generation will have, like people who don't know about what is happening. They can just just read books, look at the photos, and to understand what was happening in their country.
Of course, I mean, Georgian literature has always been a mirror of the real life of this country and its history. So somehow I'm very glad that our generation also continues this path and Georgian literature stays very close to Georgian people. Maybe we can say a couple of words about our book. Actually, this is the topic which is very important for both of us because I'm involved for example, in women's rights activism for many years already, and this is a kind of a part of my daily life, actually, to work with women, to listen to them, to know their stories, and maybe this is the reason why this book became so personal for both of us. I was so lucky that you came to me with this idea, and we started
to work with you as well.
and we started searching for these women who had incredible stories, and we actually included around 60 women in our book, and in my opinion, all of them deserve the novel of their own, because all of them are so unique, and all of them had gone through so many things, and their war is not over yet, actually, because of the creeping occupation, because of the sorrow they have inside them, because of losing their loved ones, their husbands, their children, and maybe because of the hope they have as well. Hope of returning to their houses, to their villages. I mean, sometimes I think that when we are talking about occupation, it's not only about the land, but also somehow our hopes and dreams are also occupied together with our lands. So what I really, really want for the heroes of our book is to fulfill and free their hopes and dreams.
Here we are at the Writers' House of Georgia, the house that was built by the most prominent Georgian entrepreneur and the patron of arts and sciences, David Sarajishvili. Since the very first day of its opening in 1905, the house has turned into a salon, a sort of a cultural hub for the Georgian writers, musicians and scientists. But in Soviet times, the house has undergone a turbulent history. It has been, for decades, the residency of the Writers' Union, so the house remembers the harsh years of the Red Terror and the bitterness of censorship. But today, it's an open space, a public institution hosting the International Festival of Literature and utterly every single individual who creates and translates literature in Georgia. There are not so many of us Georgians who speak, write and read the language. And yes, we do have our own alphabet and our own language, and no, it's not Russian, it's very different. We have the long literary tradition that goes back to the 5th century. The earliest surviving texts we still read nowadays date back to the 5th century. So these are the Christian writings, and then we have the Middle Ages, the big tradition of medieval epic writing, and then in the 19th century the Georgian language and literature was yet again used as the powerful weapon in the fight of Georgians against the Russian imperialism, because we used to be a part of this big Russian empire, and thanks to those late 19th century writers, the language and the literature have survived, and thanks to those guys and girls back then in 19th century, we contemporary Georgians, the younger generation of authors, are still able to write in this beautiful ancient language and pave our ways to a bigger audiences, to a bigger nations. But it's not all about past. Let's have a look what is happening nowadays in Georgian literature. Here you can see just a few titles, Georgian titles translated into German, French, English, Italian, Turkish, Albanian and many other languages. The thing is that in 2018 Georgia was the guest of honor country at Frankfurt Book Fair, and this was a key change and a breakthrough for Georgian publishing and the literature. Georgian publishers rapidly seized the opportunity to present the contemporary Georgian literature to the world with the diverse publishing program led by Georgian Publishers and Booksellers Association. And we are happy that this process has got a reverberation, so to say, and is still going on. So many other publishers from different countries got interested in Georgian literature and start to publish, translate and publish Georgian titles. So the Writers' House is trying to support this process, support the translations, and thus mark ourselves on the literary map of the world.
Hello. Here we are in Caucasus, on the edge of East and Central Caucasus. We are in Kazbegi region, in the north slopes of Caucasus Mountains, in one of the most beautiful places in Georgia, which itself is quite beautiful and diverse country. And here below us is so-called Georgian Military Highway. This name was given to this highway by Russians, who actually built the road to conquer the Caucasus. It was main road to Transcaucasia. So Russians came to this country and this region in the very beginning of 19th century. This road made a lot of troubles to local population, to free highlanders who never had lords before, and first rebellion against Russian Empire started because this highway, because locals were ordered to work on building of this and to clean it in the winter, and they disliked it very much. And also this road is very important not only because of invasion and because of many famous people and writers and militaries, and not only Russians came and discovered Georgia this way, but it was also the road which our young people, mostly they were sons of nobles, took to Moscow and to St. Petersburg and got education there. So under Russia they got access to European education, which was possible in the big cities of Russia. And this golden generation of Georgian politicians and writers, they were called Terek drinkers, because Terek is a river. We are on the valley of the Terek River right now. And Terek drinkers came back and they start to fight for independence, and they became very famous people and best people we ever had. And one of them, Alexander Kazbegi, was just from this region. And we can say that maybe today some of his stories they are a bit naive, a bit simple, but he is ancestor of contemporary Georgian novel. And this man, he lived here and he described, and his stories is also a treasure as an ethnographic material, but also he is a very big storyteller of the troubles of local people under Russian Empire and the rebellions and tragic story and the stories full of honor. His heroes of his story are local poor highlanders who have nothing, only their honor, and they are fighting sometimes alone against huge empire. And the local people, we call them Mokheve, and also in general people of Caucasus, Georgian mountain people, they themselves, they love to read books. Not all the books, I believe, but they are good readers, and they most of all they like. They always liked some romantic novels, romantic poems, and not only Georgians. I was very much surprised as a young man then I discovered that in many local houses they have poems of Scottish poet Robert Burns. and by heart they know a lot of his poem. And later I understood why, because Robert Barthes is poet of mountains, and his spirit of his poet, and he was translated in Georgian, and they find spirit of his poems very familiar. So many writers, and not only Russian famous writers like Alexander Pushkin and Lermontov and Lev Tolstoy, of course they came to Caucasus on this road, but also famous writers like Knut Hamsun. He came from Russia and discovered Georgia. He came through this narrow valley which we call Daryali Valley, and he wrote a really wonderful book. The name of book is In the Miracle Country, and he really describes Georgia and whole Caucasus like a miracle land, land of fairy tale, and he was here like many others.
Last year I was just voted best female chef on planet Earth, and it was like all over media. And so we were in a very beautiful yoga retreat on the southern part of Sri Lanka, and there was a woman who recognized me. So she came to the table when I was eating with my mom, and she said, "Hey, are you Anna?" And I was like, "Yes." And she asked my mom, "So how is it to be a mother of such a famous cook?" And my mother looked at her and she was like, "My daughter is not a cook, my daughter is a chef." Yeah, it is very unusual. I'm completely self-taught and never trained, never staged in any other restaurant. I was, as a young girl, a skier and a dancer, but also very good at school. I was doing linguistic high school, and then later I decided to study international science and diplomacy in Italy, in the University of Trieste. And when I finished my university, I met my husband, and they had this place. Sočavelj is probably the remotest place in Slovenia, if not in Europe. It is the only part of Slovenia which doesn't have highways reaching it, not even close. So you have to drive at least 2 hours to reach our place, which makes it unique. Because you know, when places are remote, they preserve their culture, they preserve more of their original character face. In Slovenia, there is no gastronomic tradition. The reason is because we are actually really a huge countryside place, and on a countryside there is usually no aristocracy, not really a lot of money. That's why also, you know, not really fine dining restaurants, because fine dining is in a way luxury. So it means that a role of a chef is not really that important. So I think what happened to my parents was the idea, you know, super educated girl who speaks 5 languages, who made her ass out to finish very difficult university, is now giving up everything what she knows. So all intellectual work, exchanging it for manual work. And this is precisely which was the idea of the chef in those years, and still now maybe. The gastronomic school or working in a restaurant was for people who couldn't do anything else. They weren't intelligent enough. So it meant my parents were panicking, and I remember there is a famous sentence. I went with my mother to the river. I just started dating my husband, and I officially was looking for a job in Brussels. And my mother, like, she's very wise and intelligent, and she looked at me and she was like, "Hey, are you going to cook?" And I was like, "Oh no, Mom, I'm not going to cook. I don't know how to cook." So this is how one of us girls needed to take over the kitchen, the philosophy of what is going on, and also physically, not physically working, but more being a role model example of the direction in which the restaurant is supposed to go. So since my husband was strongly in the wine business, the only chance was me. And this is how I totally disappointed my parents and decided to stay in the valley and not going to Brussels for a diplomatic career. So for 10 years I was just practically closing the kitchen and hardly worked. 2 children were born, one after the other. They're just 1 year difference. So that was a good thing because in a way at that time we couldn't travel because of children, because taking over the business. We didn't have time or money for it, and that was a good thing because you know, you start growing in your own direction. You start cooking from yourself without copy-pasting others, so without thinking what would other chefs do.
And what excites you about cooking?
The variety of it. I think it's such beautiful creative work. Every day there is something new coming out. We work a lot with local foragers, and the nature is so quickly changing, and we need to be so quick with it. So that's really beautiful. I'm really a restless personality, always in search for something new, something different. This is how, in this moment, I don't think we have more than 2 dishes that are the same than on the menu last year. We keep on moving and searching for something new. My father, I think as a good father, he's really proud. My mother is officially proud, but I think deep in herself, she still thinks it would be nicer to have a daughter who is a diplomat. My name is Anna Roche, and I live in Hisza Franco, I work in Hisza Franco, and I dream of Hisza Franco. I'm a cook or a chef, what should I say?
It's up to you.
Both.
Umetnost v krizi je rešilna bilka. Popelje nas v tiste svetove, ki so nam v krizi nedosegljivi.
Umetnost v krizi je predvsem priložnost za spremembo konceptov, ki so bili mogoče udobni predolg časa nazaj. Ko pa nastane kriza in se je potrebno prilagoditi, pa se je teh starih konceptov čisto iz preživetvenih razlogov potrebno znebiti.
Umetnost v krizi pomeni umetnicam in umetnikom, kot tudi njihovim odjemalcem, način duhovnega preživetja.
Umetnost v krizi je kljub temu, da je umetnost pregovorno nora, nekaj, kar nam omogoča ohranjati pamet, človeškost, duha.
Umetnost v krizi je prostor, kjer večnost ni izgubljena. Prostor zaščite edine resnične lastnine človeka, možnosti izraza njegovega duha. resničnost do naših predstav ni pretirano spoštljiva. Veliki zgodovinski dogodki pač vplivajo na naše usode in na to nimamo vpliva. Na kar pa imamo vpliv je pa, kako bomo te dogodke nekoč razumeli. Recimo ta pandemija bo razumljena kot en naključje, en težka stvar, ki nas je doletela, ali jo bomo znali razumeti kot del ene širše zgodbe o odnosu človeka z naravo, o prepletenosti in vzajemnosti človeških in družbenih in naravnih sistemov in procesov. To bo odvisno tudi od umetniškega izraza, kam se zazre duševnost umetnika v izolaciji.
Velikokrat smo že slišali, da je fikcija resničnejša od resničnosti. In to verjetno prav zaradi tega, ker ljudje s pomočjo fikcije lahko gledamo resničnost skozi neka očala, ki ne bolijo. Če se ti neke stvari dogajajo v resničnosti, te to na tak ali drugačen način prizadene. Če pa ti stvari, ki jih poznaš v resničnosti, vidiš skozi literaturo, je kot bi si dal neko tako kopreno, neko prosojnico, ki ti omili vse te ostre robove in lažje te zadeve sprejmeš in jih mogoče tudi na nek način zaradi tega, ker nimaš tega čustvenega zidu, bolje razumeš.
Posameznik se nahaja v distopiji vedno, ko nima dostopa do lastnega življenja. Govorimo o meri in obliki razdalje, ki ga ločuje od vizije življenja, ki bi se mu zdelo vredno in smiselno. Če je ta razdalja prevelika, če je nepremostljiva, je posameznik v distopiji.
Zgodovina človeštva je zgodovina kriz, ki so družbe spremenile bodisi na slabše, bodisi na bolje. Umetnost se rojeva iz razpok, iz situacij, ko se zelo močno zatresejo koordinate.
Umetnost na nek način je nek človeški pojav, zaradi katerega lahko v kakršnih koli pogojih življenja odsevamo drug drugega in na ta način ostajamo skupaj.
Stanje permanentne izolacije je za človeka nevzdržno, brez literature pa bi bilo nemogoče.
Mnogo prej kot umetnost bo svet spremenil kak virus oziroma bakterije, tako kot je bilo to v primeru kuge. Umetnost nima te moči, da bi abruptno spremenila svet, tako kot recimo naravne katastrofe oziroma politične in družbene spremembe. Je pa moč umetnosti v tem, da lahko predhodno zelo natančno in senzitivno razbere situacije in tudi napove dogodke in da potem lahko post festum potegne na plano tiste povezave, izkušnje, občutja, dogodke, ki nemara za pogled večine ostajajo zastrti in hkrati lahko umetnost katastrofe in z njimi povezane krize postavi tudi v širši kontekst.
Seveda se položaj umetnikov z takimi krizami vedno, vsaj trenutno, spreminja, čeprav spet kot imunolog mogoče vidim te napovedi velikih sprememb precej pretirane, ker sem skoraj prepričan, da to ni neka globalna sprememba življenja, ampak je samo neka motnja, ki jo čez 2 leti niti ne bomo več se dobro spominjali.
Figura konca ima zelo različne, včasih tudi popolnoma nasprotne konotacije, od katastrofičnih, kataklizmičnih do neke vrste happy enda. In recimo, če se spomnimo na obdobje po padcu Berlinskega zidu, ko je Francis Fukuyama lansiral tisto znamenito tezo o koncu zgodovine, je imela ta teza vse elemente happy enda, torej kapitalistična liberalna demokracija kot najvišja možna oblika človeštva, ki konec koncev nima v sebi več nobenih protislovij. Dejansko pa se mi zdi, da zdaj že kar nekaj desetletij živimo ujeti v precepu neke dvojne logike konca. In da marsikatera distopija, marsikatera apokaliptična vizija sveta ne izhaja enostavno iz tega, da se bo nekaj zgodilo in se bo svet končal, ampak prej iz tega, da se pa nekatere stvari nočejo končati in da nas bo prav to pokončalo, ta nemožnost konca. Apokalipsa včasih tudi obupan poskus zamisliti si konec tega, tako da si pač zamislimo konec vsega. In v tem smislu se mi zdi, da v bistvu ne živimo po koncu sveta, ampak prej nekje v samem tem koncu zataknjeni v sam ta konec, ki pa se sam ne konča in se noče končati.